this. So, if you guys mess up or anything, feel free to just take a pause and just if you want to just say, hey, Zach, cut that out. That was dumb or whatever. Just let me know. And we should be good to go. So we're recording now. I'm going to jump off, and then you guys are all good.
Okay. Cool. Let me know when.
Go for it.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Know Your Rights, the consumer podcast or lawcast, if you like. We also have the YouTube channel. This week we've got Todd Friedman from the law offices of Todd Friedman along with us. He's a great friend of mine, and he's also one of the most well-renowned consumer advocates in Southern California. Welcome, Todd.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Yeah, and apparently Ali is the redheaded stepchild because I didn't mention him in the introduction. So Ali is obviously an attorney at Kazaruni Law Group, and he's in charge of the intake process. And obviously, he's the one that has the most interactions with our clients. And I think for the purposes of today's conversation, his insight is going to be really, really, really useful. Thanks for being here, Ali.
Good to be here. Thank you, Abbas.
So first of all, how are you guys coping? Now we're 6-7 weeks in. Who's losing their minds?
Well, I have kids, so me more than you.
Well, actually, I think your kids are trying to get away from you because for those of you that don't follow Todd on social media, he's the TikTok champion. And like his TikTok videos are amazing, but I always feel like the kids are like, Dad, you're really freaking embarrassing me. There's one even with you in a cat outfit dancing fairly, like, I would say about 50 meters away from your kids, and they're kind of like shaking their heads.
That's almost like me hitting on the dolls, my daughter's dolls. Yeah. It's all about the final product.
It is good production quality too. So with that said, we had a show maybe, 3-4 weeks ago, maybe even a little bit longer, and when Corona was coming out and quarantine was about to happen, and we were anticipating certain types of litigation. But now that we're 6-7 weeks in, the leads are coming in, and we're going to get some Ali's insight into that, and the litigation has already begun. Anything from the privacy sector, you've got the Zoom litigation going on because obviously everyone is Zooming with the social distancing, all the way to business interruptions and, employment arena, all the way to refunds and so on and so forth. And we're going to kind of go through that bit by bit. Ali, let me go to you first.
Sure.
At Kazaruni Law Group, what is like the main issue that, the populace is having, our would-be clients? What is their main, fear, complaints, or the things that they think they need legal representation for?
I would say by and large, the majority of calls we're getting are in regard to refunds. Things like Ticketmaster, I think it's threefold when it comes to refunds. It's usually events, things like concerts and various shows like that. Airlines is a really big one. And then tuition issues as well, people trying to get tuition back from universities. And it's very interesting to see sort of from a PR perspective what these companies are saying publicly. You have someone like Ticketmaster where while all this craziness is going on, they're sort of quietly changing the language in their own policies to exclude refunds for shows that are rescheduled. So normally their policy would say something along the lines of, if your event is rescheduled or canceled, we'll issue a complete refund. Somewhere along the line, they went in there and changed that to say, if it's canceled, we'll issue a refund. So all these.
Well, hold on a minute. Are you saying that they're changing the terms and conditions or the policies and procedures like retroactively?
Well, so that's the issue, right? Are they able to do it retroactively? It seems like that's what they've been trying to do, at least from the calls that are coming in. People are saying, look, I purchased this ticket for this concert in July, let's say last year. From what I remember, it said that if something was rescheduled or canceled, I would get a refund. Now they're saying it's going to be rescheduled, but they're not giving me a refund. So this is obviously a huge issue that we need to deal with.
Well, let's hold the retroactive thought, let's footnote that just for the second, but I want to come back to that. And if I forget, remind me and start waving our arms, running around the room, we'll do something to bring me back to that. But Todd, Are you seeing a similar pattern? Because I know that you're very heavily involved in the intake at your law firm. Is that kind of similar thing that you're seeing?
In terms of general intake?
Yes.
So yeah, so first off, I mean, we're consumer attorneys, and fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to couch it, when the economy's bad, people are losing their jobs, we get more calls regardless. So the stuff that we've been typically seeing over the past few years before this pandemic, debt collection calls, issues with people's credit, people losing their jobs, we're seeing more of that now, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. So our intake on the normal stuff that we see is almost doubling. Getting back to Ali's, some of his points, yeah, we're seeing a bunch of the university stuff in terms of tuition. Some of it's a little bit more nuanced. It's not just, we're not giving you refunds, but live classes are now turning to online classes, and people who actually pay for online classes are now paying the same price as people were paying for live classes. So we're seeing a lot of those. And universities are even changing their terms and conditions, and we'll get back to that point later on. Retroactively as well, we saw a couple of those intakes today that we were discussing. StubHub cases, people bought tickets or sold tickets, can't use them. But a lot of these refund cases, the price gouging intakes have been astronomical. People complaining about, certain, big chains increasing their prices, and these people can't even, afford to pay those prices. Some of the complaints are not really well founded. You just kind of have to sift through them, but we're getting a lot of price gouging complaints right now.
Well, I mean, you heard it here first. I mean, our YouTube and podcast from about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we kind of highlighted the California price gouging statute, which is actually a criminal statute, and we thought that this may be an issue. And sure enough, it was. So that was, I hope it wouldn't be, but unfortunately it is. But let's go back to Ali's point, the footnote that I said. So first of all, we always say this. There's a warning at the beginning of the show, everybody. We're not giving legal advice. Every case is different. If you want actual advice, feel free to call or find yourself an attorney. But let's just take that hypothetical that Ali gave. So somebody calls Ticketmaster or StubHub or whatever, buys a ticket, and then retroactively they change the terms and conditions. Is that going to be enforceable? From my perspective, I think it's simple contracts law, really. I would say no, because there's a meeting of the minds when you first purchase the ticket, and those are the terms that bind the two parties together. You can't, after the fact, go and unilaterally change the terms and say, now these are the ones you're going to be bound by. What do you guys think? I mean, Todd?
I totally agree with you on that. I don't think they can change the terms and conditions. My biggest worry would be the arbitration clause that they previously agreed to when they went into it. So it would really depend on where you filed a case like that, what type of judge that you got to be able to beat ARB to begin with. I think if you overcame that hurdle, I wouldn't be half as worried about them changing their terms and conditions, especially in this, pandemic era. I think that's bad. Will leave a bad taste in a judge's mouth, frankly.
But I find it kind of offensive too, Ali. I mean, like, the company is taking these people's hard-earned money. We've got almost a 20% unemployment rate. People need that money to put a roof over their heads, feed themselves. And they're like, we don't know when this concert's going to be in the future, but because it technically hasn't been canceled, you're not getting the money back, and we're going to keep hold of the money. I mean, I find that personally, just on a very facial attack, very offensive.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, people have busy lives, and some people travel to see their favorite band. Some people buy tickets, for an anniversary gift with their wife when they take off from work. Like, you can't just change things like that. And I think so on that note, as you said, meeting of the minds earlier, I've been seeing the same thing with universities. So, for instance, I was saying how it's interesting seeing how different institutions are sort of reacting to their whatever their policies are. And I know at least some universities, for instance, where they're changing, let's say they're not canceling a semester, but they're saying, okay, everything's online. They've come out, at least some of them, and said, look, you're going to get the same professors and the same quality of education. So what's the problem? The problem is exactly what you said, the meeting of the minds, right? When these students or potential students signed up and paid to go to this university, they didn't pay for the online course. If they did, that's one thing. But if they paid to be in a classroom setting, in a traditional classroom setting, that's what they should get. And if they can't be offered that, they should not have to pay, in my opinion.
Well, I'm not even saying that they shouldn't pay, but there should be a price differential at least, right?
Right. Something needs to be done to get closer to what it is, to compensate for the fact that we can't now offer what you signed up for.
I think Todd had something to say.
Yeah, especially the university, like we talked about, has a separate online program that's cheaper. The people, who can't be in the classroom, which is understandable, safety is the most important factor, but if they can't be in the classroom, they should be paying the same amount of money as the people who are paying online. It's just common sense.
I mean, also, I think it's just a different experience you're paying for as well. I mean, it's been a while since I was at law school. Ali, you were probably the most recent graduate. I mean, even that's still been a fair few years. But
Sure.
when I was at law school, they have the lunches, the guest speakers that would come in, they would, put on there would be the different organizations that you get involved in. And it's that interpersonal kind of atmosphere that I think is value added, because when you even have office hours with your professor and you're in person and having that personal relationship with them and being able to have some kind of camaraderie with your classmates and have study groups. And yes, you can technically have a Zoom study group, but it's just not the same. You can't be sharing notes the way that you were before. And that interpersonal relationship that you would have, I think, is value added.
I agree. And also, I mean, something like, in law school, they always talk about the Socratic method. I mean, how many of you two personally, how many of your classes were completely taken over by the teacher asking one student a question, someone else chiming in, and now there's a whole debate? Try doing that on a Zoom meeting with 50 people. It's not going to be the easiest thing to achieve.
It's actually a really good job you mentioned that. I was just on a faculty meeting at Cal Western because I teach there, and I'm going to be teaching next semester on Zoom. And
Good
so
luck.
I've got an upper elective class, and my class is very much interactive, and it's all about me, calling on different students, talking about consumer law, and and a lot of the cases that we discuss are our cases, Todd's cases, our cases, and I know the lawyers, and I'm trying to explain this to them and get their reactions about what was really happening and how that's going to play out on Zoom. I honestly don't know, and I just cannot imagine it's going to be as good. But I think we should have a round two, or even Todd and you should be a guest in a couple of my lectures. You can actually feel it for yourselves and see how it goes.
Was a former law student who hated the Socratic method because I always got embarrassed when I was called on. I think this is going to be great because now the student can be like, "Oh, technical difficulty. I can't hear what." So I'm all for that.
Todd might pay extra for the online course.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. That's funny. Here's a real question, Todd. How many of your classes were you actually sober in?
I was writing screenplays actually during most of my classes. So I was actually very sober. I just wasn't paying attention.
And for those that don't know, Todd has a legit Hollywood movie that has been produced, made, and he's in it. He wrote it. He produced it. And when is it coming out?
Hopefully at the end of May, it'll be fully done. It's about the collection industry, so which we obviously know a ton about, and is really based on my experiences, suing debt collectors over the past, decade, called Collection. So we're excited about it.
And I've read I read the full script, and even maybe bold enough to say I had a couple notes on it here or there. It is really good. It's funny. It's actually true to life. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing you in the courtroom scene. That's going to be kind of cool. Really, really cool. So congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have a name for it yet?
It's called Collection.
Collection.
Yeah. So very close. Very close.
I actually think it's going to do very well. It's not the type of thing that goes straight to DVD and makes it really big in Slovakia. This actually, I think, may do well.
So we're hoping it streams.
Funny story, Todd actually asked me to star in the film, but I was pre-booked already on other engagements. So maybe the next one.
I think that was another film. But we'll talk about
it. Okay, this is somewhat of a family show. Stop right there. All right, so we were talking about the kind of in the same vein as the educational institutions, but like, getting refunds. I think there've been probably about 10 to 20 lawsuits against gyms because people on automatic renewals, they're paying their monthly fees, but they're not getting what they bargained for, which is the access to the gym. And the gyms are not refunding whatever. And I've actually read that 24-Hour Fitness is literally about to file bankruptcy. So well, it's at least being suggested. So it's going to have some devastating effects. I mean, do you want to talk to that a little bit about these kind of institutions like gyms where they're not giving refunds?
So I do a lot of the intake for my firm, and I personally haven't seen a ton of those cases come in, surprisingly, because we've had a bunch of auto renewal gym cases in the past.
Yeah.
So I'm surprising I'm not seeing more of those. But I think it'll be a lot of question of maybe a contractual interpretation. Is there a force majeure clause in the contract or whatnot? I don't know, but I feel like if there is an auto renewal statute in the state of California, and especially if you cancel, they should stop taking. If they keep taking money out of your account, the violation of that statute, maybe F'd on a bunch of other things.
But let's even say that most consumers probably will. I mean, in this time, they may forget to cancel the auto renewal. But let's even say that they don't cancel. Let's play what you just stated. Let's follow that through a little bit. Isn't there an unjust enrichment kind of argument? Is like they're getting the money, but the consumer's not getting what they bargained for. So like they're getting unjustly enriched. I mean, that would be the argument, right?
Yeah, on one hand, yes, there's an unjust enrichment argument, but if the consumer isn't, complaining about it, and they're not doing anything to stop it, then what's the point? I mean, unless like a year later he's like, oh, the gym reopens and they retroactively go back and say, well, I want to get, last year's, fees refunded. I don't know, but yes, there's definitely an argument to make there.
But I mean, isn't the point of class actions because you get, because I'm guessing not the entirety of the populace of the gym is not complaining. I'm sure there are a couple of individuals that are complaining, saying, hey, that's $25, that's $35, and some gyms are $150, depending what gym you go to. They go and say, listen, I'm not getting the benefit of the bargain. Give me my $150 or $30 back. And they say no. Would you not say that they have standing now to represent everybody and saying, hey, we all want our money back for that month?
I 100% agree with that. And if you can, again, I hate to be Debbie Downer here, if you can beat the arbitration clause, then that's probably a good class action.
I think that's a separate issue. And I agree. A lot of these gyms are going to have an arbitration agreement, and that's going to be a problem. But let's go to your force majeure argument. Now, for those of you that are listening and watching and not legally, and most of our viewers are not going to be lawyers. Force majeure means act of God. So if there's a tornado, if there's a hurricane, flood, those are like what are called force majeure defenses, where there's a contract and one of the parties breaches because they could not perform because of an act of God. Now, I think we would all probably agree that people can't go to the gym because of the social distancing that's being put in place because of the COVID-19, and in the same way, they cannot produce the goods or their service of offering the gym for the very, very same reasons. So, Todd playing the devil's advocate and like showing the argument that the gym would use is like, well, yeah, there's an act of God, but I would argue the same thing for the consumers. So it's kind of a wash, and therefore we should be put in the position that we would have been but for the contract, which is give me my $30 back because you're not providing anything, and then let's continue the contract when it's practicable.
Totally agree. I think that's a really good argument to make, unless you're in Georgia where the gyms are open. But that's a really good argument to make. But there's also, we've been hearing rumblings on Law 360 that, Senator Mitch McConnell wants to pass a bill that says you can't file a lawsuit or class action because of the coronavirus. I don't know how much weight that's going to hold or what's going to happen with that. But, there's definitely business interests in mind, and lobbyists and laws that could get passed that could prevent, people like us from filing, lawsuits to protect the consumers.
Right. And I think you're talking about business interests. Let's talk about business interests in a minute, because I think where those two concepts don't reconcile fully is in our next topic. Before we go there, just to go full circle for our audience, it's that if you are partaking in some kind of service or good deliveries that is being interrupted, and you're on some kind of automatic renewal, you're making monthly payments, you very well may have a claim because you're not getting the service or the goods that were promised to you for the money that you've been paying. And I think if that's what's happening to you, you should definitely call someone like Todd, myself, Ali, or other attorneys near you, because those are valid claims from my perspective as a consumer advocate. But let's go back to Todd's point, and that's a great transition, which is McConnell's point of view is, well, we need to protect businesses because that's the backbone of our industry. But ironically, it is it's corporate America that is also having a hand in destroying the businesses, which is the backbone of our economy, in the form of business interruptions insurance denials. So, and I know you've been very much involved in it with me on this, Todd. So why don't you expand a little bit? And Ali, I'll have you chime in a little bit after that.
Yeah, I mean, small businesses especially, they purchase this insurance, business interruption insurance, which provides for a payment, if the business is interrupted due to something like a pandemic. It's sort of like where, small businesses applying for that PPP loan or something like that. And now you have these insurance companies, because they're getting so many claims that are just, starting to routinely deny, payments to the insurers, and it's becoming a big problem. You're seeing a lot of complaints about it. A lot of lawsuits are going to start coming out about it, and it's terrible. It's just a terrible thing.
Yeah, and I think there is also another set of business lawsuits regarding the PPPs, which is, the government offered up, some money to assist businesses and to be operational and not lay people off. But there's theories, at least, on lawsuits that have been filed, that certain types of business were being discriminated. Bigger businesses were getting the loans over the smaller businesses, which really it was designed for. Ali, why don't you talk about some of the intakes and some of the things that you've been experiencing on those two kind of theories?
So, 3 words when it comes to the business interruption claims: policy, policy, policy. These are, every single one of these claims requires really looking word for word through your policy. And most people either don't have time to it, they don't have time for it, they don't even know how to access it. I think the point is there are attorneys out there like myself who don't have kids, who only have a cat, and who have time during this coronavirus season to sit down and go through your entire policy word for word. Let someone take a look at it and see whether or not, if you are denied coverage, there's anything that can be done, for that. So I think it's interesting. A lot of cases you have, if it was as cut and dry as, hey, look, you don't have business interruption coverage, so, obviously the claim is denied. That's one thing. But we're talking about people, as Todd said, who are every month paying their premiums for business interruption coverage, and they're still being denied. Now, sometimes those denials, are make sense. Maybe there's a virus exclusion in there. But a lot of times they don't, and it's just left up to a particular ambiguity in the contract or in the policy. And when you're looking at something ambiguous in the contract, you have on one side this small business owner who's paying his premiums. On the other side, you have the insurance company that actually drafted the language of the contract. So fortunately, in our courts across the states, if there is ambiguity there, an attorney will find that. A consumer attorney can find it and use it to argue that you should be covered. So it's really, really crucial to get a copy of your policy. First thing first, make sure you have the entire policy and get it over to someone to really go through it and see whether or not you should be entitled to coverage.
Yeah, and then the insurance company is also thinking, let's deny these claims. If this, Joe Schmo decides he's going to get an attorney and sue us, go ahead and sue us. We'll drag it out. The courts are obviously slowed down right now because of COVID. Some courts are even closed. and it's really they try to use like the situation to their advantage, and which is call like it's terrible. So I mean,
yeah. Let's hope that McConnell doesn't get his wish. Like that's the takeaway there. So Todd, I mean, I know you guys do more employment than we do, and you do a lot of you've been doing employment class actions for a while now. What are you seeing any derivative employment kind of cases as related to COVID-19?
So we're getting a volume of calls, of people wanting us to look over their severance agreements, or we lost our job because of COVID. We're having a hard time getting unemployment because of 30 million plus Americans apply for unemployment, and there's a backlog on that. A lot of that stuff we can't really help with. California's an at-will state, so if you're losing your job and it's due to COVID, there's technically nothing illegal about that. Some of the things that we are seeing though are people not wanting to come into the office because they're non-essential, wanting to work from home, or they have pre-existing health conditions that can make them more susceptible to COVID, and they're reaching out to HR and saying, I'm going to work from home for a few days, and then they'll get retaliated against, demoted, let go, or something like that, because of them trying to protect themselves and their health. And we see those as good cases. I mean, those are in our either whistleblowing or retaliation cases that we can help people with. But we're definitely seeing just a lot of employment intake generally, but that's definitely a derivative case, due to COVID that we're seeing.
Got it. Okay, and I think lastly, we mentioned at the beginning, the price gouging. Ali, why don't you talk to me a little bit about price gouging? What kind of things you're seeing on the intake front?
Price gouging, I think it was in the first few weeks when this crisis began, we definitely were receiving many more calls than we are now. I think now at least the majority of the sort of reputable big businesses out there are no longer, charging $60 for a 100 milliliter bottle of hand sanitizer on their shelf.
Right.
But it's still out there. It's still out there, and like Todd mentioned earlier, with the insurance company sort of taking advantage of the worst possible situation. I mean, it's exactly the same case here. It's pretty cut and dry. They're not allowed to do it. If something seems much more expensive than it should be during this time, pick up a phone, call someone, see whether they're allowed to be charging what they are. I would say definitely the calls have gone down based on this, but I think it's one of the more egregious sort of consumer violations here.
Yeah, I feel like they're righteous cases. It's pretty offensive. What is your experience, Todd?
I mean, I got like 7 calls today, and on price gouging, and a few that I haven't gone back yet. I had a dentist reach out, stating that, his normal PPE that he gets from his medical supply company, they've like doubled the price of that. So he's really, fired up about that. And that's the case that you and I are actually going to be looking into.
Yep.
A couple people, I got one person saying, an unlicensed person is selling stuff on the street for double than what he normally does.
Right.
We get calls like that all the time, right? And interesting ones, this thing's being sold, this product's being sold on Facebook. This guy's selling something on Facebook or eBay for triple the price normally that it should be. And can we hold them accountable for it? My gut says I don't think so. I don't know. But
I mean, probably, but I mean, the reality of the situation is you're probably chasing ghosts, because this guy is probably working, or it's just nobody that doesn't have any money and working middle of nowhere. But I mean, it is illegal conduct from my perspective, at least.
Right. And a couple of them, there's one at a big chain where it looked like it was a good price gouging case, but she couldn't afford to pay the difference, so she didn't really have standing. So
yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because I've noticed we've got a lot of calls where people are noticing that certain product or a certain good is way more expensive than pre-COVID. And that would be a really good lawsuit, but for the fact that they didn't purchase it. And so you don't have standing because you haven't been injured by that harm. And so in order to be able to bring a lawsuit, I think it's important for our listeners and our viewers to understand that you actually have, at least in California, you need to have been harmed by that price gouging, which essentially means you have to have purchased it at the increased price. And in an ideal world, though this is probably not as necessary, keep the receipt. Let's, because the burden of proof is on you if you are the one bringing the claim.
Right.
Have you noticed these, no standing, intakes, Ali?
Absolutely. I've had several calls in the last couple of weeks of people saying, "Hey, look, I saw this at whatever store," and I say, "Okay, just send me, let me see your proof of purchase." We could go from there like, "Oh, well, no, I'm not going to buy it at that price," and it's so it's good to know, and it's, but like you said, if you haven't been actually harmed by it, there's really nothing that we can do to protect your rights there.
Yeah. Give my final thoughts. Did you guys got anything else you want to add to what we're doing on the COVID front, guys?
I have one quick thing from me is just it's really interesting to see, especially what some of the big players in the game, some of the really big companies are trying to get away with. One thing that I didn't really get into is airlines. Hot mess with airlines. Tons of airlines calls every week. In some of these cases, it's not just about looking into the policy. Some of these cases don't even require that. So with airlines, for instance, I had someone call me last week complaining about a major airline where her ticket was canceled. The airline canceled it, and yet they're refusing to give her a refund. So for things like that,
they give a credit, right?
Right, and for things like that,
that's a great case.
The Department of Transportation has their own rules on
that. Hold on. No. Did you sign up the client?
We'll talk about that later. But so for things like that, the Department of Transportation, a separate agency has already made a rule on that. If an airline cancels your flight, you are entitled to a full refund. It makes no difference if it's tough for them. If it's tough for them, guess what? It's also tough for the person who's out $1,000 on that plane ticket, who's also dealing with the crisis. So it's just very, very interesting to see what companies are trying.
What about conversely, though, if you're now afraid to fly because of the pandemic, what happens there?
Right. So then it's different. Then it comes down to, okay, we need to take a look at the airline's policy, right, to see what you're entitled to. But the point is, in some cases, it's so egregious where, hey, look, it doesn't matter what your policy says. This is the law, but like you said, the majority of cases involves looking at the policy, seeing now if I canceled it, am I entitled to only credit or a refund? And I think that is the case for most of the major airlines. If you cancel because you're afraid of flying, but your flight hasn't been canceled, for the most part, you're probably just entitled to that credit. But then other airlines also have policies where if we just change the timing of your flight, now where there's, let's say one airline had 5 flights in one day from LA to New York, and now they're trying to put all those people on one morning flight because there just isn't a large enough demand, too many people canceled. Most likely, depending on that airline, you're again entitled to a refund if the timing of your flight has changed substantially, or if there's now a when there wasn't.
I actually had a scenario kind of between both of your hypos, which is the client had a ticket going with a major airline, but then he was scared to basically go and see his parents, and because of Corona, it was just breaking out, so he canceled. And under the policies, he was only entitled to a credit, not a full refund. No harm, no foul, no issue at that point. But then subsequently, before the date of what would have been the departure date, the airline canceled. They give everybody else a refund, but they don't give him the refund. They just give him the credit because he canceled before they canceled.
Right. I know someone who's in exactly the same boat, and all they did was refund the change fees that are normally charged when they wanted to cancel it. They were initially charged a cancellation fee, and they went back and retroactively refunded that. But they were not refunded the whole amount like everyone else. And it's kind of unfortunate because all he or she doing was sort of preemptively doing what they probably should have been doing and being cautious, and they got penalized for it.
Todd, when I gave you my hypo, you were pulling faces. You don't like that one?
No, I just thought it was actually an interesting. Right, I was like, oh, you canceled first, and they canceled after. I don't know. I mean, that would be an interesting fact pattern.
I would sue for that, and I know you sued for a lot less.
Well, yeah. I mean, come on. We knew that. Edit that out.
Oh man. All right, before we go, Todd, yes, no question. Are you wearing pants?
No.
I'm not either. To be fair. All right, ladies and gents, thank you very much for tuning in. And so, we gave you an insight into 4, predominant areas that have been derivatives of COVID-19. We're talking about insurance, price gouging. We're talking about not getting full refunds, and obviously the employment aspect of it. But I don't want you guys to think that this is an exclusive list. There's going to be a myriad of different ways that COVID-19 that are probably going to be screwed out of something here or there by corporate America. And if you're not sure, there's a simple answer. Most consumer attorneys worth their salt are going to give you a free consultation and tell you if you have a case or not. So please, please, please take advantage of that wherever you're located in the United States. And in the interim, please, please, please socially distance yourselves, stay safe, hope your family stay safe, and until next time, keep it legal.
Good job, guys. I'm going to stop the recording.